Good evening. I'm Mayor Doug Sprouse, and I want to welcome you to Springdale City Hall, where it's our pleasure and honor to get to host this historic meeting. Washington and Benton County Quorum Courts together, and really been looking forward to this. I hope the room works well for you. Little housekeeping, if you need something, I plan to be here, so just look for me, and I'll try and get you directed to the right place if I can be of assistance. Also, my chief of staff, Colby Fulfer's right over here, and I don't know how long Colby will be here, but if you ought to be able to find one of us if there's something we can help you with. We've also got a few officers in the room. They can help also direct you to anything you need. Again, it's my pleasure to host. I'd like to start things off by inviting you to stand and join me in prayer, and then I'll lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for this opportunity, and we thank you for these who serve our people. God, I just ask that you give them direction and guidance tonight and understanding as they take in a lot of information. God, for those presenting, I pray that you give them clarity as they speak and as they present. And Lord, for any of the public that's here, we just ask your blessings on them, and we ask, God, that you just help these courts respond in ways that are pleasing to you, and Lord, we're just trusting you for that and for a good meeting tonight. We lay all these things before you, and we ask you these things now in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen. All right, flag's right back there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. And at this time, I will turn it over, I believe, to Judge Deakins, right?
That's correct.
All right.
First of all, Mayor, I want to thank you and your staff and the whole city of Springdale for your warm hospitality this evening. I can think of no proper setting than this municipality right here that spans both of our borders. And with that, and with the help of my colleague, it's my honor tonight to call the inaugural joint meeting of the Washington-Benton County Quorum Courts to order. And with that, we'll move forward with the evening. Clerks, will you go ahead and do a roll call of our respective quorum courts?
Justice Bruns. Here. Justice Wilson. Here. Justice Massengill. Here. Justice Rivera-Lopez. Here. Justice Lyons. Here. Justice Ecke. Here. Justice Dean. Here. Justice Washington. Here. Justice Coger. Here. Justice Dennis. Here. Justice Hires. Here. Justice Rios Stafford. Here. Justice Lemming. Present. Justice Ricker. Here. Justice Pond.
For Benton County, Jeff Dunn.
Here.
Ken Farmer.
Here.
Richard McKeon.
Here.
Mike Miller.
Here.
Carrie Smith. Brian Armis. Joseph Bollinger.
Here.
Joel Jones.
Here.
Danny McCracken. Dustin Todd.
Here.
John Rissler. Kurt Moore.
Here.
Bethany Rosenbaum. And Joel Edwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those rolls. We're going to open, me and Judge Waring, with a few introductory comments this evening to get the meeting started. What I'd like to say is just good evening to everyone that's here tonight, members of the Benton and the Washington County Quorum Courts, distinguished guests, our friends at NWA Council, but also citizens from all across this area have come here tonight to this beautiful place that we call home. It's an honor to welcome you all to this historic joint meeting, a moment that marks a new chapter in our shared history together as a region. Tonight we come together not just as representatives of two counties, but as neighbors, united by a common purpose to discuss how to best shape the future of Northwest Arkansas. It's no surprise and no news to anyone in this room that our region is experiencing growth at a scale that we've never seen before, and that includes new businesses, new families, and new opportunities that are transforming our communities at an unprecedented pace. This growth is historic, and I believe it demands a response that is equally as historic, and I believe that's why we're gathered here tonight. We cannot ignore the reality of this moment, the influx of people, the strain on our infrastructure, and the need for housing, and the chance to build a future that reflects the best of who we are is what our pursuit should be. This joint meeting tonight is a bold step that took a lot of people, a lot of effort to make a reality, and I want to thank all those here tonight. By coming together across county lines, we're sending a clear message. We're ready to work collaboratively, creatively, and inclusively to harness this growth to the benefit of all of our residents. Tonight's regional growth presentation will shine a light on our opportunities and our challenges, giving us ideas and inspiration to move forward together. I'm excited to stand alongside or to sit alongside this evening with my colleague and my friend, Judge Mooring, and with all of you as we embrace this historic moment. Let's make the most of it. Let's make the most of it for our communities, and let's make the most of it for our future. Thank you. It's my honor to be here this evening, and it's my pleasure to turn it over once again to my colleague, Judge Mooring, for remarks and some ground rules. Judge Mooring.
Okay. Thank you, Judge Deakins, and I hope you all can hear me. I have to press a button while I'm speaking here tonight, and that's a little bit new to me. Thank you so much, Mayor Sprouse, for hosting us in this beautiful facility. Thanks to my colleagues at Washington County, the JPs who are here, Judge Deakins, your team, your staff. A lot of effort went into this from both staffs to make this occur, as Judge Deakins said. And I also want to thank the audience. I wasn't exactly sure how many folks would show up here tonight and what the level of interest would be, and it looks like there's a high level of interest. We don't always get this at our Benton County Quorum Court meetings, so we appreciate you all being here tonight. As far as we know, this is a very historic meeting, the first time that these two quorum courts have ever met. And I do hope it's the start of a new phase in regional cooperation between our two counties. I'll tell you, though, it's not exactly new that we cooperate and work together. I had a reporter ask me earlier, tell me a little bit about the relationship with Washington County. Do you have a good relationship with Washington County? And I said, we have an excellent relationship with Washington County. But it's primarily reactive. And I'll give you the best example of that I can think of, and that is when we were struck a year and a half ago with one of the worst disasters we have ever had, one of the first people I called before the sun came up was Judge Deakins. And they sent the cavalry. And that's part of the relationship that we've had with Washington County and that Washington County has had with us. That cooperation is deep. It's not always seen by the public, and I want to thank you publicly for how you all reacted, because that was one of the most tragic incidents we've ever had in Benton County, and Washington County came to our rescue. And I say that because that was a reaction to a disaster. So tonight hopefully starts more proaction, more proactivity, and I hope that's what we see out of tonight. Our agenda tonight, as Judge Deakins indicated, is to hear about growth. We have a very detailed study coming tonight. I hope you had a chance to see some of the posters out in the lobby. And this is a study that was funded by the Walton Family Foundation that's going to be presented on behalf of Northwest Arkansas Council. I'll get into that in a little bit. But it's thought-provoking, and it's going to present some data that we should all, as policymakers, should be thinking about as we go forward. Part of my role here tonight is to also indicate some of the ground rules that we have. We have a big audience here tonight. We also have a very detailed, weighty study that we want to get to tonight. So what we're going to do is, after these opening comments, we're going to go to public comments. As we would with any public meeting, we'll have a period of public comments. And tonight we're going to have 30 minutes of public comments. We're going to ask that you limit them to 3 minutes. And we're going to have 30 minutes so that folks can come and speak, but we also need to get to the agenda tonight. We would also ask that any comments that you have, direct them towards the chair, not towards any specific individual. And we'll let you know when you get close to your 3 minutes. And then at the end of 30 minutes, we're going to go ahead and end public comments, and we're going to move on with our agenda. I would also caution our JPs that we don't react or respond to the public comments. We listen to them politely, but this is not a give and take. This is not a question and answer period. This is a period to hear from the public. And we do want to limit it to 30 minutes so that we can move on with the agenda, because I think we're going to be here for a while tonight, because this is a big topic and we need to spend a lot of time on it. So after that, we're going to have the presentation. Then we'll have a period of question and answer from the JPs. Would ask that you let the presenters go ahead and finish their presentation before we move on to Q&A. That way we can make sure everybody gets their time in and has some time to ask some questions and answers. So with that, I do want to move on to public comments. And what we'll do is, I think, do we have a sign-in sheet, Tiffany? We have a sign-in sheet, but what I would ask anybody who wants to address, I'll call it this body, this joint body of Benton County, Washington County, please come to the podium. Let us know who you are, where you live. Please sign in, and you have 3 minutes to address this body, and I would ask you to please be polite with your time so that we can get to as many speakers in the 30 minutes as possible. All right. Who's going first? Here we go.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing public comment. Tonight, this committee has talked about and is going to talk about community development a great deal, but I am here to speak to you tonight about community destruction. We started with a prayer, asking for God's guidance for these court members. And I know Justice Armas took the time to attend a Christian rally 2 Sundays ago. But I wonder if any of you have taken the time to attend a meeting with the migrant community in Northwest Arkansas, especially with Aire. Many local families are now afraid of law enforcement, afraid to do the very things like getting groceries and going to work. These hardworking community members, people have done nothing wrong but exercise and seek their human rights. This is a moment to reflect on the real impact of the work. While you talk about serving the community, these policies create division and fear. People in fear of state violence through ICE, the sheriffs, and the National Guard. Continuing in this direction will only sow distrust, fear, and panic. The families being separated are on your consciences. The lives destroyed are on your consciences. The tears of the children are on your consciences. Indeed, pray for guidance, but also pray for forgiveness. I recognize this struggle personally. My own family fleeing Poland, losing relatives to Nazi persecution. A legacy carried on in notices like this one I hold now, listing exceptions for deportation. Today's policies seem all too familiar, using the same pretexts of law, order, and security. History shows these actions are resisted, like in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and the fear I see now in the community my grandmother and great-grandmother once described to me. And you would see it too if you listened to the stories. The entire immigrant community are my brothers and sisters, and as a Polish American, I choose to stand with them in compassion. You too still have the opportunity to change course. In the 287G program, as a county legislator, protect our workers. Call on the governor and legislatures to push for an unconditional amnesty program for all undocumented people. Protect our families. Stop helping to export immigrants to detention facilities and reunite families as quickly as possible. Stop the racial profiling of people and require ICE agents to remove masks and wear identifiers. Restore our trust with due process, humility, and outreach. Then we can talk about community development instead of community destruction. The president has said the homegrowns are next. Well, here I am. Leaders of Arkansas, look out and decide if you support divisive policies or if you have empathy in your hearts. If you choose hateful, divisive policies, then we have a simple statement. We are organized. For the love of all humanity, we will frustrate this court and the legislative body with pressure until you sit down with our community leaders. Across Arkansas, we will organize until you cannot sleep without hearing the cries of the oppressed. To the people inside this room with a conscience, organize. To the people outside protesting, organize. To all those who are still unsure, organize. No somos nada si caminamos solos, somos todo cuando caminamos juntos al paso de otros pies dignos. As a community, we must overcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
My name is Kenneth Lovett. I'm from Fayetteville, Washington County resident. I have one question with several parts. I know you can't answer it, but I'm looking forward to seeing what's in the presentation. Is NWA waste being considered in NWA future planning? If so, how? If not, why? I'm affected every day. Yes, sir. It's a little short. I'm affected every day by vapors from Waste Management Ecovista. I can guarantee you that's where it's coming from, and I can show you where it's coming from if anybody's interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? Okay, that will close public comments for this evening, and we'll move on in the agenda. Item number 8 is a strategic growth study by DPZ Consultants, and I want to take a quick minute to introduce our speakers tonight. Our speakers tonight are Matt Lambert and Susan Henderson. They're the reason we're here. They spent many, many months working on this study, and there's a lot of great information. Again, if you haven't seen the boards out there, I'd encourage you to go take a look at them. As Judge Deacon said, definitely one of the things we have in common is all of the growth that we have in this region, and we're going to hear a lot about that tonight. You're going to hear a lot about growth. You'll see on one of those boards, we've all heard it, by about 2050, this region's going to be about 1 million people. And it's more important than ever before for our counties to start thinking about what that growth means. A lot of our growth is directed in cities, but I think it's really important as counties we start thinking about the future as well, because the growth has come our way and will continue to come our way. Northwest Arkansas Council, a great organization that's been active in this area for many, many, many years, helping us with the prosperity that we have encouraged us to come together tonight, and I really appreciate Nelson and Rob and the others who have encouraged that. To hear from Matt and Susan. The work of Matt and Susan's team is being coordinated and funded by the Walton Family Foundation, as I mentioned earlier. Tonight is the 13th meeting in what's called the Growing Home Roadshow that started last Wednesday. So hopefully by about the 13th meeting, they probably have about it right. Now, don't you, Matt? Okay. There'll be the 17th meeting on Wednesday night. I'm already hearing some of the feedback from people who were at some of the previous meetings, and the feedback is very, very good. It's very thought-provoking. Matt's team at DPC Co-Design and Susan's group at Placemakers are national experts on handling growth and preparing cities and regions for the future. You'll hear a little bit more about that. They've made many trips to Northwest Arkansas. I've been in the room with them several times over the past several years, 3 years to be precise. And they've worked on projects for Rogers and Bentonville. The strategy is an everywhere in Northwest Arkansas plan. Fayetteville, Springdale, Benton County, Bentonville. You cover the whole roadmap up here, and we appreciate that. I anticipate Matt's going to speak for about the next 35 to 45 minutes. Susan, I'm sure you're going to share your views along the way. You're shaking your head, but I've been told that you will. And we will leave time for questions. So at the end of the presentation, we'll entertain questions from the JPs, and we'll go ahead and get those answered, and then we'll adjourn for the evening. So Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you'd come on up and show us what you got. Thank you.
All right, hopefully yes, this mic is actually excellent. I was worried it was too short, but I should have known by the mayor's height, which is similar to mine. All right, let me just get this on here. I mean, you're taller than me. So he's even taller, and it worked out pretty well. So I'm gonna get this presentation. There's a lot of stuff in here. Judge Mooring said, bring it all to us, because we wanna hear about all the detail. It's not every single slide I could possibly bring, but there's a whole lot. So first, Growing Home. Thank you again for inviting us to share. Like you said, Susan will probably pop in. There's a lot of content, so it's good to have the questions at the end, but I'm happy to answer a clarifying question or two along the way, since there's a lot of charts and information. Really what this Growing Home work is about is not only the challenges, but really how growth can present opportunities for the region. We're dealing with the pains, and we'll talk a lot about that. But if we take them head on and we work together collaboratively, growth can be good for all. Growing Home aims to produce a strategy. It's not a plan. Doesn't have teeth and regulatory authority. It's a strategy that seeks to deal with the difficulties and bring us towards the opportunity. All the issues that I'm going to discuss, so I'll discuss them mainly one by one, but they're all interconnected. These issues with growth, how growth affects traffic, infrastructure, housing, it's all interrelated. And the way that we grow can solve the mounting issues, or it can make them worse. So first and foremost, this is from a survey that we have open. I want to just announce to everyone the survey is at growinghomennwa.com. It's on QR codes on all the posters out there. Please share it with your communities. We want to hear from as many people as possible throughout the region. In this survey and in previous surveys and even in conversations that we've had with folks around the region now, but also for a number of years, as the judge shared, we've been working here. Natural beauty and outdoor recreation is important to most people in the region. That's the number one thing that we've heard that rings true. I had a great Sunday afternoon driving out to Eureka Springs and then back up to Pea Ridge and Bella Vista, and really sort of taking in that landscape. It's really incredible. But also small town character and neighborliness. People bring that up to us all the time. What they say is that they feel that they're losing that character, that connectiveness. And over the years, we've sort of learned that folks are on a first name basis around here. You know, you walk into a room and everyone knows each other. They've all been working together here or there. And as we get more neighbors, we're not having those same connections as a community. So we had small communities, and as you've grown, there aren't communities within that community to share that connectedness. And as we've had these conversations, we've sort of sussed that out. We've learned that's that sort of character, that small town feel, that connectiveness that people feel is being lost. And yes, that is threatened by growth, and it's because of how growth has been occurring. But these things, natural areas, the great outdoors, the rural landscape, small town character, neighborliness, connectedness, they can be protected, taking the right steps. And so that's really a lot of what we want to talk about, because we just jump to the numbers and the numbers are confusing. Because we can say 38 new residents a day, what does that really mean? 150,000 new households is, sort of mind-bending. 500,000 new residents, it's a lot. It's really not only about numbers when we talk about growth. The regional character, the rural character of the region, the natural setting, we want to talk about this, about protecting these assets. The last 50 years of growth, they've seen about 100,000 acres developed in those 50 years. That's a lot of land. That's a lot fewer farms, less fishing and hunting, less kayaking and hiking. So the question with growth is, what's the trade-off for losing those areas to places that folks live? Can we get something better? Can we get something that is an equal trade-off to what we've lost? Or are we just going to get more traffic, more debt, less community, and fewer open lands, which is what we've been dealing with overall? But, growth doesn't have to be all difficult. It can be a good thing. Growth can provide more places for community to come together. That's what I was mentioning has really been missing as we've been growing. And that can happen while also protecting rural areas. Now, spaces and places where community happen, they're a key part of growth, and we really haven't been building new places for community. Now, there's finally talk within a number of cities of doing so, which is great. But we need to think about that as this growth continues. Community doesn't just come together everywhere. It doesn't have to be in Bentonville Square or Fayetteville Square. It can be on any town's main street. It can be at the farm stand. There are lots of places for community, but we have to be proactive and have the intention of providing these spaces as growth occurs. So the new growth that we've had really doesn't look like Northwest Arkansas at all. We've been to all the towns, small towns around, mid-sized cities, big cities, gone through historic neighborhoods, new growth areas. New growth really doesn't reflect the history of the place. And people notice, right? The trade hasn't always been a good one. So this is what we're talking about, the growth. There's three maps here, and I'll try to, because you don't all have a screen in front of you, I'll try to describe these, and I can't really point to stuff. But this is a look at three maps on the left where we started. That's 1985. It's not where you started, but that's the earliest aerials that we can get. And the developed land was about 28 square miles in total. In 2024, in the middle where we are now is about 175 square miles. So that's a lot of growth from 28 to 175. And we're looking at 2050, not because you're going to stop growing in 2050, just because people have a hard time thinking past 25 years. Like 25 years is a long time. But you'll keep growing, and it won't stop at that point. But it's a spot that we can look at. So we've looked and mapped things out, and I'll share the maps a little bit later in this presentation, that if we do some work, if we don't do the work, it's going to be more land than 240 square miles. If we do some work and work together, we can control some of that growth, maybe keep it to 210 square miles, still an addition of 37, which is more than the entire region was in 1985. So that's really the key that we're looking at. There's a lot of growth. The pains have mounted. Residents really don't know why. Like, why is there more traffic, and why is the growth happening how it is? And they actually don't know all that much about the infrastructure, except that their utility bills are going up. Where and how the growth has occurred is really the source of the difficulty. So even if everyone worked hard at it, doubling the population, like I said, no matter what, it's going to be a lot. But will that growth solve the problems or make it more difficult? So this is a chart that includes both the growth rate and the total number of people. So I put these both on a chart for you because a lot of people talk about the rate of growth, like we're the fastest growing town, or this is the fastest growing county, or this is the fastest growing region. And that can be kind of confusing because if you're a small city with a growth rate of 400%, that might just be 50 houses, or some other cities it's 5 houses. But if you're a big city with 1%, it could be 500 houses. But overall in blue, just all along the line, you can see that sort of steady growth, and here at between 20 and 30, we're looking at a doubling. So that as a region is quite a significant amount of change. So even though between 1970 and 2010, the rates are higher than what we see in the next 25 years, the total population growth is actually a lot more. So I just want to say we don't always have to jump to is this the fastest growing or that the fastest growing? The point is that we're all experiencing growth. And as I go through this, you'll hopefully take away that everyone's connected one way or another and connected to that growth. Growth in one place affects everything else around it. Where that growth is expected is also critical. While most of the growth, about 51%, is expected in the bigger cities, up to 21% could be in unincorporated areas. That's a lot. There's a lot of pressure to grow in the counties. But projections are a guess, and they will have to deal with policies. They also have to deal with the market and maybe a new startup gets really big and we get even more people. We don't know, but projections are just something to work with. So more could go to the cities, but even so, the pressure in unincorporated areas is still going to be high, and that's why we're talking today, because you all are dealing with policy of how growth will happen there. So today, as we all know, the region's dealing with growth issues. So what we want to do is investigate some of those issues to consider how the implications for growth within cities relate to the implications for growth that y'all will have in the unincorporated areas. So we bring this up to say that there's a big change now that cities don't have control over the extraterritorial jurisdiction areas, right? Those are now with you all. Cities don't control subdivision and permitting and so forth. And we show this graphic because there's a few choices you have, is not to do much about it at all, to add more regulations but keep the county government small, to grow the county government to provide services to people that live in those areas, and to do the same, but provide more rules. So this is something you don't have to decide today, but you're going to need to think about. And I bring it up now so we can talk about how cities are dealing with growth and what issues they've had and how those may or may not impact you. And in many cases, we're talking about the bottom line, the ability to pay for maintaining roads and infrastructure and providing services for residents. So the first thing that we hear a lot about is housing cost. So yes, housing cost is high. It's not high everywhere for everyone. These circles on the left compare Northwest Arkansas to the US on average in terms of household cost burden. So this means are people spending more than 30% of their income on housing? And in Northwest Arkansas, homeowners are much more cost burdened than they are in the US in general. But renters are not. Renters are much less cost burdened than they are elsewhere. To the right, and we don't have this all for unincorporated areas, I'm sorry, but we have it for the cities and we've characterized it, and that's why I'm saying we're gonna look at how the cities are working. In the big cities, the big four, housing ownership is very much so cost burden. There's a vertical line at 3.6 on the bottom. That's cost burden for ownership. The big four are very cost burden. Mid-sized cities are a little bit, and small cities are just bumping up against the edge. On the renter side, big cities are less so. Mid-sized cities a little bit more, and small cities are also right up against the edge. To me, this shows me that there's an imbalance in what housing is available in the places that people want it. What happens in the big cities is that there's more folks who are intending to rent, who would like to rent that fits their household composition, that fits their household income, but there aren't enough rentals available. So they're sort of forced into ownership, and home ownership's great, but some people may choose to rent, and if that's not available, they're forced into ownership and they can't afford it. And that's really the dynamic that's happening here. So, and I thought I did replace it. Here. We had this diagram, which we've shared, and then my team said, this is really hard to understand. So then we just replaced the same one with this one. So I'll walk you through this one. Hopefully it's better. And this is that it's not just that there's not enough new housing. It's that what's being built doesn't match up with the needs for families and their incomes and what they're looking for. So this was from an analysis of the whole region in terms of what people who are moving here or moving within the region, what those households need for housing in terms of their average family size, their education level, where they're coming from and where they're going, and their household income. So this diagram on the left is the region, and then we just show small cities in the middle and the big cities on the right. And so this is a sort of supply and demand analysis for housing. So we'll just look at the region first, and we have single-family homes, townhomes, and multifamily and rentals. So in terms of supply and demand, we have a lot of homes, and there's a lot of demand for homes. And well, let me start out by saying every single place in the entire region needs more homes. Single-family homes, large and small, townhouses, apartments and condos, it's all in demand. You have a need for everything. But in terms of where the supply is falling behind, it's really in the rentals and the multifamily, as well as townhouses at the regional scale. Though the dynamics are different in the small city. So small cities, the demand for single-family homes is higher, and there's a smaller demand for rentals. But even there's a mismatch between supply and demand. In the unincorporated areas, it sort of follows even further. There's even more demand for single-family homes, less for rentals, but the supply of rentals in that area is not being met, and that's causing people to move to places that they wouldn't prefer and become cost burdened because the housing that would fit them best is not available. So it's not, overall, that raises the cost for everyone. If a family who would be in a rental is in a home that isn't best fit for them, the person that's best suited for that home now has to move on to something else that doesn't fit them. It just cascades into a cost issue. So we're seeing that very much so in the cities. But it's not only about how much housing costs, really because a lot of the new homes, and everyone hopefully has a choice, but there aren't enough homes everywhere, so some folks can't really live where they want to live, right? That's part of the supply issue. And because a lot of the new homes, most of them that are being built, they're far from jobs, and they're far from services, far from schools, far from the grocery store, people have to drive long distances every day. For most people in the region, that means that it costs about the same to drive for your car, insurance, gas, multiple vehicles in the household, as it does to pay for housing. So these numbers, looking at the typical household in the region, they're spending 24% on getting around and 22% on housing, leaving only 54% left over. Cost burden is that 30%. So when you add those two together, that's 46% of household incomes are going to both housing and transportation. So that leaves less for everything else. Now, if you didn't have to spend so much on transportation, you could spend more on housing and afford it. But people are being sort of hemmed in on the transportation side. That big old chart to the right is a really interesting one. I wish you all had that chart close by. They're on the posters, and we're going to share all the information. But what this shows on the bottom in blue, that's how much driving every household is doing on average every year by city. So from left to right, each one of those bars is a different city within the region. I think we got 32 on there. I think we cut off after, if you're less than 1,000 people. On the top, there's two orange colors. The lighter one is cost of housing, and the darker one is cost of transportation. So they stack together. While we think that housing has gotten really expensive in Bentonville, because driving is less there compared to other places, when you add the two together, it's exactly the same as West Fork, Greenland, and Lincoln, because their housing is less expensive, but the transportation is more expensive. So we have to look at them together as a region. And so there's few choices for people that would like to live closer to work or closer to school. And that, like I said, affects their ability to pay for housing and other needs. Not forcing anyone to be in one place, but people just don't have the choice because there's not a supply. We don't have enough housing near jobs and schools and grocery stores and services. And we also have built out in areas that haven't provided new places for jobs and schools and services near the housing that has been built. So that causes this difficulty that is really stressing household budgets. So, of course, traffic, we all, no matter where we go, traffic is an issue. Everybody brings it up everywhere. So we just figured, it's not really a big deal here. It's pretty bad. For as small as the region is right now compared to other areas, and looking at doubling, your traffic is pretty bad. Getting to work, getting around, there's no question about it. And a lot of this has to do with folks living further from school and further from work and further from their services. So that is what causes that traffic. And I'll talk a little more about this. It's also that new developments, when we're building new areas, we're not connecting streets, we're not adding enough streets. So people are funneled into only a few larger roads. And those roads seem big at first, but once we start adding more development and we don't add more roads, then there's more people on there, and you can add a lane, but you're soon going to run out of capacity if you don't have more roads. So what these four maps, they're kind of interrelated. The left one shows, you can see 49 on there, right? Like that thick red line. And you see a couple other thick lines, but not that many. So that's really where traffic is heaviest. And there's not a lot of other thick lines besides 49 because we don't have a lot of other roads that people can use. So you can see probably pretty clearly 71B is going up north, and you can see on the left 59, and you can see like 14th Street coming in to Bentonville and going across. But there's not a lot of choices that people have in terms of what roads to take. So we're funneling a lot of traffic onto just a few routes. The next three are really related to that housing concentration. In the orange is where most of the houses are. Next to them, destinations, the red, if you can read the red there, that's where people need to go to get to work and to get to the grocery store and to get to school. And so everybody's moving from the orange areas to the red areas and back every day, that back and forth movement. But the last thing on the right, street concentration, that shows us that they don't have a lot of options in terms of how to get there. So they're stuck on one road, and that road is congested, and those intersections back up at the lights, and you can't solve that by adding lanes. It doesn't work. You need to solve that by having more destinations in more places, closer to where people live, and more street connections, so there's other options to get there. So there's a lot of more connections that are needed, more roads, like I said, but that also means more money to pay for them and to maintain them. And of course, we had to get to infrastructure. Cities are having a big problem with infrastructure right now. Sewer capacity is the big one. Cities have a lot of work to catch up. There's a lot of money to catch up on that. Luckily, the state and the area council are working together to study that, to study the sewer capacity. But in the work that we've done so far and the analysis, there's a lot that needs to be put into that. So rapid growth. This rapid growth means a lot of new pipes, and for wastewater, but also stormwater. Stormwater is an issue that's going to grow, especially as the region adds more pavement. So you're starting to see that in the historic downtowns. Well, I was just driving around on Saturday in Fayetteville, and it was like I gushed on those streets. But they've added a stormwater utility because they've needed to, because it's becoming a problem. And this is something we're seeing around the country as well, because prior to the most recent decades, there just haven't been rules for managing stormwater. And so older places just don't have the setup for it. But in a lot of newer places, it's sort of put off on the development to do themselves. And what we've found in other regions is that the POA doesn't really know how to maintain stormwater systems. You know, the developer builds it, the rules are over with the POA, and then the POA takes control of it, and 20 years down the line, and the stormwater system is backed up and it doesn't work, and now the flooding is the problem of the municipality. So we've seen that with cities, but we've also seen that with counties that have allowed growth to occur in that manner and didn't have the rules for stormwater. Like the big ones have had to take it over. Like all those little individual stormwater systems have had to be taken over by a number of counties. Similar with wastewater, step systems and septic. Eventually, as you grow, those need to be replaced and maintained, and it's not really something that the POAs are really great at. So just those are issues with growth. The cities are dealing with it right now, and it's costing a whole lot of money to them directly, but also now it's at such a scale that the region kind of has to work together to figure out how to foot that bill. I won't dive a bunch into this graphic, but because there's just too much on here. But this is showing in the colors, those are the different watersheds. So that's where water flows out into different rivers or Beaver Lake. And the dots are where all the different wastewater treatment plants are. And so one city may have a wastewater treatment plant in 2 watersheds. Many cities share a watershed together. What that means is if one city grows, their capacity is affected by the other cities around them. So everybody's connected because in the end, you're outflowing to the same watersheds, right? So growth is interrelated when it comes to water and wastewater, just in the way as it is with transportation. Like you may have control of a number of streets, but you don't control who drives on your streets, right? You know, anybody can drive on anyone's streets. You all probably run into that with maintaining county roads. You know, those that may not be RDOT. You know, folks driving through from the airport are, you know, impacting that infrastructure. So it's the same thing with the city streets, but not only do roads not follow municipal boundaries, neither does wastewater, neither does stormwater. So it just really underlies the need to work together. So this piece is on street maintenance as a proxy for infrastructure, right? So what we looked at is the developed area for large cities, mid-sized cities, small cities, how much street there is. And then we looked at budgets and said, well, you know, given the cost of maintaining all that infrastructure, are we paying for it on an annual basis to the extent that we should be? And well, no, nobody's anywhere near paying for it on a regular basis. And this is just something that's going to be exacerbated by growth if growth doesn't pay for its own infrastructure. This is where Susan should heckle me that I kept this chart in here. So you don't need to understand the details of this chart. That's not the point. The point is mainly that budgets are complicated. This is a small city budget. The big city budgets, you really wouldn't be able to read anything. But I just wanted to point out a few things. As you know well, property tax doesn't pay for much of the services. Sales tax really drives the game around Arkansas. But even between sales tax and property tax, so on the left of this chart, those are all the revenues. And again, this is a small city, so it's simple. And on the right side are the expenditures. So we don't need to look one by one, but I pointed some out. Sales tax and property tax are pretty much going to fund the government and public safety. And that's just about it. So police, fire, and government services, that's where sales and property tax go in most cities. Street maintenance, infrastructure, that's mainly being paid by state money, grants, other intergovernmental transfers if you're at a bigger city scale, but it's not really being paid by the growth itself, it's indirect. So this is a big source of why we don't have the money for paying for maintaining this infrastructure. And so that leads us to ask what sort of growth pays for how much? Does it pay for itself? And by pay for itself, we mean, like, let's look at the pattern of development, how much street there is, how much pipe there is, and then those probably need to be replaced every 50 to 70 years. And so we're going to divide that cost over the 50 to 70 years that are typical, and then ask the question, does the sales tax revenue and the property tax revenue pay for the maintenance on those, as well as police and fire and government services? So we sampled, this is, again, around in the cities, except for the rural areas and large estates. We sampled those in both Benton and Washington County. Overall, the downtowns, as you may expect, they pay 5 times what they cost. So they're making a lot of money for the cities to invest in, in things like parks. Obviously, we saw they're not investing in street maintenance so much. Fayetteville on there was 560%, some are less. Also, because of the way that the tax structure works, commercial corridors below, those are making about 4 times what they cost. So that's 415% on average. Springdale was 390 for the corridor that we looked at. So those are bringing a lot of revenue. They could perform better if they added housing, but those are bringing revenue. But on the right-hand side, really the neighborhoods being built in the last 50 years are paying about 30%. You know, they don't have sales tax to support them, so it's really about 30% of the cost. The rural areas that we sampled, they're really only about 4%. So out of low-scale rural development, you're maybe getting 4% of what it costs to provide services. The old neighborhoods, we have on there 36%, so they're a little bit better than new neighborhoods, but not much. But we were able to sample a few areas that have grown differently, that have mixed housing of different types and provided a little bit of retail in with them. So like Johnson Square, for instance, is 160% of its cost. That's just the portion that's north of Johnson Ave. And then we also looked at the sort of closer in neighborhoods in Bentonville, not downtown, but like right next to it, that are getting townhouses and so forth. There's still single-family homes, there's townhomes, there's a few shops, and those are at about 140% today. So, you know, you don't have to be paying 100% for everything, because you can have a downtown or you can have a commercial corridor, and that can pay for other types of development. But that pattern overall, as growth occurs, is really going to affect the bottom line. And so we're seeing that with cities, that as growth has spread out, that there's a lot of stuff that doesn't pay for itself. The commercial corridors do pretty good for the city, but are they in balance? And there's a maximum amount of commercial corridor that can be built, because shops need houses. And if you don't have enough houses for the shops, then you can't get the retail revenue. So it has to be balanced. Now, if we could just build commercial corridors all day, then you'd have a lot of money. But you can't. So it really has to be a balance between the different forms of growth. And really, we wanted to bring this forward because, you know, if we keep building in the pattern that has been going on for the past, 50 years, it's really just kicking the cost can down the road. And a lot of the new stuff that's been built hasn't yet come to its replacement time. Remember, I said 50 to 70 years for replacement of roads and pipes. So a lot of that development over the last 50 years is just coming up to its replacement time. And so these issues are really pertinent. Other cities are starting to find out the hard way too, because they've made the same choices, though you've grown a lot. You haven't grown as much as some other places have, though you're poised to do that now. So all of these pieces intersect, they're interrelated. Housing supply, housing cost, the pattern of development, new roads, infrastructure capacity, deferred maintenance, and future budget needs. These are all complicated things that come together when you're dealing with growth. So we're, again, looking at this in the cities, and now as you consider in the county areas, unincorporated county lands, what to do about your growth. These are all things that could be an issue. So they're for consideration. For the counties, it also has to do with, do you need to grow or want to grow a bigger county government or not? I think that's come up with hiring planning staff and so forth, but that's, the beginning. There's also additional need for fire. As you grow out, the whole response time requirements mean that you need more stations and personnel and equipment, and that just continues itself as you hit that 7-minute response time requirement, the next 7-minute response time requirement. So just really paying attention to the bottom line. And the value of that growth really, over time, needs to pay for the future liabilities. So over the scale of the region, that's what we're looking at here. This map, it doesn't have this is showing the the taxable value of land. That should be a different label. It should say taxable value of land by acre. So this isn't the property tax, or the sales tax. It's just the value of the property. But sales tax would basically follow this with a little spike along the corridors. Basically, what the map shows is in vertical, those spikes are where the higher values are. So anything that's in the orange to pink to blue is high value. That's paying for its costs. Anything that's sort of yellow or green is not quite paying for itself. And there are little green spots in the unincorporated county you can see around, and there's also some places that have bigger spikes. But for the most part, those are concentrated in, Fayetteville's core and Rogers' historic core and Pinnacle. Springdale has a spike, Siloam Springs, Gentry, Decatur, Gravette. They all have areas that are producing a lot of value, but then also a lot of areas that aren't paying for themselves. So as you grow, you really need to consider, like I've said, does it pay for itself? So the question that we're sort of faced with is, will the region keep spreading out? The middle map here is not realistic, so don't worry. But the middle map shows that if we grew and we grew just like we are right now, just sort of repeat what exists and accommodate another 500,000 people, that's how much land it takes. So the question is, what choices are made to determine how much land is occupied by future development by 2050, and what does that mean in terms of revenues and costs? Does it pay for itself? And like we started out, are we preserving the rural heritage of the region? So, almost toward the end of the slides, so I know it's been a lot. Again, like I said, if we're determined to work at it, you can preserve the rural areas and ensure it pays for itself. We've modeled out costs and revenues for growth following a couple different options. This is following city plans. So, like I said, that middle one isn't realistic because cities have plans and they are, a number of them are doing infill, building new downtown areas and so forth. But that's not going to absorb everything, and the development industry isn't really set up to build in the way that the zoning is allowing them to, right? So this looks at three scenarios following those city plans to see where growth might happen. And this is just all the growth that's allocated to the cities. So not unincorporated areas, but the cities. And right now on the left where we're going, that's following city plans, but understanding that development's not going to necessarily follow them. So the maps might be a little bit light. They're a little better on that TV, by the way, where the orange areas are new growth and the red areas are where we see infill happening, so development within places that are already developed. And the yellows, just places that are developed that aren't going to see much change. So where we're going on the left, that's about 59 square miles of additional growth that would produce about $190 million of new revenue, about $170 million of cost. So that's over the whole region, that's only $20 million to reinvest, and we're already behind on infrastructure spending. So we can't really do that. The middle one is working a little harder, working together, can reduce down to 45 square miles developed and a revenue of maybe $130 million a year to reinvest, or work harder, some real commitments, some compacts at the region and so forth, and you can get down to realistically down to 37 square miles and $340 million to reinvest. So that is a lot of the choice to be made, how much to work together and how hard, and will that provide what is needed for paying for our infrastructure liabilities that are currently unfunded, but also paying for things like the parks that people desire, and more funding for schools and other transportation issues that aren't being funded right now. So there's a lot to pay for, and how we grow is really going to determine whether that's possible or not. So growth can produce places that people love, and it can preserve small city character, and it can save rural and natural places, and it can bring community together. So it's not all bad. It can be good if we work hard at it, and it can pay the bills at the same time. You know, the region has a great history. It's also been through a ton of changes, and there's difficulties, there's changes ahead, but you know, the future's great, the future's bright. So it brought back to this where we started. In the county, with the sort of change in the ETJ and also just in general what you all want to see and allow for growth, you have a lot of choices to make here coming up. Like obviously not here right now. Now is time for questions. So I'll just end with a few last thoughts, and I can always go back in slides. For the work that we're doing in Growing Home, we'll make recommendations for solving regional challenges like more cooperation and coordinated planning, funding opportunities to deal with congestion and coordinated investments, that alignment between where people work and live and what options there are for getting around, how infrastructure is affected by everyone around them, and how development affects infrastructure, how housing is funded and developed, and that's the whole character of are we building places for people to come together to build neighborliness. So that was 40 minutes. Hopefully not too long. There's a lot in there, and we're here for as many questions and comments as you all have.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate that. And the way we're going to do this, because I know we're going to have a lot of questions. Bethany's already getting with it. I know we've got a lot of questions tonight, and that's great. What we're going to do is we'll kind of go back and forth. Judge Deakins will call on the JPs from Washington County. I'll call on the JPs from Benton County. Please go ahead and let us call on you as we try to keep this as orderly as possible, recognizing that a lot of you are going to have questions. And so with that, who's going to go first? Justice Rosenbaum. And we do have to share mics, so great facility, but I don't think, Mayor Sprouse, you've ever had an audience or a crowd quite like this up here. Again, I cannot thank you enough for the accommodation tonight. This is fantastic. Thank you. Justice Rosenbaum, kick us off.
Got it. Matt, great job explaining the complexity and in an understandable way in 40 minutes. I thought you did awesome. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to ask one, and it's a big picture question. So I'm sure you're familiar with the Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning Commission, their studies, and over the years they've conducted many. And it struck me that the outcome of their studies are similar to yours. Actually, they're the same in terms of what is a priority for Northwest Arkansas residents. And it's preserving our greenscapes, our landscapes, our view sheds, as well as our identity and our character. That is what I hear from my constituents. It's what's been the trajectory. You can say, this is important to us. Now, you study places all over the nation. Based on your experience, I want to ask if you are aware of, I'm hoping so, has there ever been a tracking of a community, a community that's 25 years ahead from us, that's done this path, that's followed, either you gave us an option in the middle road or a more like hardcore path, that can look back and track that their values have been sustained in those 25-year period? Is there hope for this? Because part of what I'm hearing is that in order to have increased revenue to pay for the infrastructure and the maintenance and all the needs we have, it means that equates to we need higher density, particularly in multi-use developments, that's where the revenue is going to come if our sales tax and our property tax doesn't change. So those two things don't exactly work in my mind. We're going to have higher density, a lot more people in these concentrated mixed development areas, and then how are we going to also maintain our identity and preserve our character? Are there places in the nation that can say, yes, we can do this?
Yeah. Can I answer? Yes, please. There have been mixed successes, and it's usually on the back end, on the collaboration and the agreement cross jurisdiction, because that gets complicated. Probably the most successful one has been the Salt Lake region. They've made some really great strides. They picked, out of 4 options, they had A, B, C, D. They picked C. So they didn't have something right in the middle. And it was more density in specific places. And what that does is, depending on how you as justices with your judges choose to grow, it allows you to preserve more of the thing that your community is saying is precious. So, like, I want to put in a plug for your agricultural heritage, because we've noticed that a lot driving around, and having food security near home. Once that's gone, it's, you're shipping it in. And so it's not just the landscape, which is so stunning, but it's the fact that you have this, you have a fabulous agricultural heritage here in these 2 counties as well. And so if you densify the newcomers in compact mixed-use areas, then that takes pressure off of the rural areas.
I would just add that it doesn't have to be that dense to function. So, you don't need to go 5 stories everywhere, You can get a lot in a small size. And really, a lot of the historic cities, even small cities, are pretty compact, and they work out pretty well. It's just that's not what we've been emulating for a long time. So we do look back to not only the history of the cities that are big cities now, and any of them, they're historic core, except for Fayetteville, but Rogers' historic core is pretty small, and Bentonville's pretty small. But their squares, much like Lincoln Square, they just grew faster. But it's that historic core has all the pieces that are necessary to sort of replicate and grow, including a mix of different housing types. You may need a little bit more, but it doesn't need to be significantly divergent.
Justice Rivera Lopez?
Thank you both for coming. Thank you for everything that you've put together. My question is regarding higher density places where, we're building more dense housing, specifically as it pertains to infrastructure. When we talk about something like a watershed, how does the county, how do any municipalities within these counties benefit from the fact that we get dense housing? Because as I understand it, the more concrete that we cover, we make impenetrable surfaces for water, that leads to more flooding. So what benefit could you, elaborate for everyone in the audience and everyone on these courts to understand what kind of benefit we would see from, better maintaining our watershed and trying to ameliorate these things before they get worse?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly mixed, and there's trade-offs between all of them.
By the way, there's a flood watch for tonight and in the morning.
Yeah. So if you are in a more compact area, you do have more pavement, but you also have more income to be able to pay for the stormwater systems to be able to handle it. And one of the issues that you run into right now is just the fact that, like I said, the historic areas were built before stormwater management exists, except for that lovely park in Fayetteville, Wilson Park with the stream. That is a stormwater management system in itself, and we can build stormwater management like that. So it's really about being able to pay for that management, but also not spreading out further, because as we spread out further, it means more pavement and roads and parking lots in the locations that people are driving to. So you actually end up with more pavement in the end when you're spreading out, even though over a small area, the denser development has more impervious surface. It's in aggregate, the same number of people in a larger area is more total impervious surface, even though it seems to be, more green because you have, more grass here and there, but it's actually in aggregate more impervious surface than it is on a smaller area. So I don't know if that's, yeah.
Justice Miller.
Thank you. Thank you both. I think you'll hear that from everyone. It's a wonderful presentation. I moved to the area. I grew up in Arkansas, but central Arkansas. I moved to the area after I retired from the Air Force about 13 years ago. Rogers area. I am amazed at the growth just in the time I've been here. So my questions are all tied together. They have to do with your raw data. How comfortable are you, first of all, how old is the data? Secondly, how comfortable are you that it's good data? And have you seen in the last whatever number of years that the intensity of the growth has spiraled up?
Yeah, so the vast majority of the data is census data. And they have the American Community Survey, which is every 5 years, so in between. So we track with that. There is additional information that we have that our consultant, Zimmerman Volk Associates, they bought from Claritas, which is a data analysis clearinghouse. So that data is solid. We're making sure that we got the label right here and there, but that's solid. Now, in terms of the change, yes, we've seen a lot of change, but it's most of that has been in the housing cost area. We have an interesting set of charts. They're on the posters out there, and in a document called City Socioeconomic Analysis that will be on our website, which Rob from the council calls fever charts. But basically tracking household income over time using that census data, and then household cost for purchase and rent. What you can see is that the story is different everywhere in the region. Some places, like Fayetteville, has always been expensive to own as far back as 2000 at least. But other places have just gotten more expensive in 2018 or 2023, and that's even the case in small cities. And so I'd say across the board, very recently, it's gotten hard for everybody. But it used to be more variable. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there were more places that were clearly more affordable to live, and that's made a huge change, a huge leap within the last 5 years, even though some places have been expensive for a lot longer.
Justice Rios Stafford. Justice Dennis, you might have to pass that mic down to her if you don't mind, sir. The other way.
Thank you. Okay, it's on. Thank you both for this great presentation. It's really great to see numbers behind a lot of these things. I've been involved in one of the local Strong Towns groups for a few years now, Fayetteville Strong, and we see a lot of the same sort of philosophy, I guess, there with this, about how getting enough density for the infrastructure to pay for itself or even have a surplus. I don't know if there's a question here, but it seems like from the county perspective, achieving this is going to require a lot of coordination with our cities, because getting them on board with this is really going to be kind of the key. My husband's on the Fayetteville City Council, for example, and they have some real knockdown, drag-out fights over density and protecting, rightly, people are concerned about protecting the character of Fayetteville. They're concerned about, density near them, their neighborhood changing, things like that. Sometimes environmental concerns, right? And I'm all for saving trees. But sometimes with the bigger picture, when a development gets blocked because it might involve cutting down a tree within city limits, what happens you see sometimes is the big picture is that growth has to go somewhere. It gets pushed out to the county where 4 trees get cut down. And so, and I think because people are looking at just the domain of what they're in charge of, right? So a city council is just in charge of what's inside its city limits. Sometimes people aren't looking at the big picture. And I know that you kind of mentioned the example earlier of like the Salt Lake City region. Is that an area where they've gotten the cities and the counties to be able to kind of coordinate as well?
Yeah, they've been really good about coordination. Susan mentioned there's a number of other regional efforts that have occurred, and some have been less successful in doing that. Salt Lake has been very successful, sort of in a similar setup where it sort of began with a nonprofit that was not really any government, and they got everyone together to work together. There are some, if you don't mind, there's some pieces of what you brought up in the story in Fayetteville, and I haven't been to any of the council meetings, but I've heard. That is, there's a ton of strategies that we can help bring forward. One thing is that the lowest hanging fruit pretty much anywhere are the big corridors like 71B. Like there's a whole lot of capacity that you can fit within 71B if you can make the roadway a little bit nicer to be along, and there's strategies for doing that. But we're seeing in a lot of places that is the sort of first place to go that people don't get so mad about because it's not right in their neighborhood. And then there are some issues like trees. We've done a lot of driving around, but also Googling on the aerial panning around, and there's a lot of new development that really doesn't have any, and so you've lost a lot of tree canopy. Now there's other places that have done well, like Washington D.C. had a nonprofit that managed a tree canopy plan for the region, and we think that's something useful here because we see a lot of areas, and even the historic downtowns could use more trees. Well, that's good for stormwater too, but also for public health. So it's true that we need to be looking at planting trees, and perhaps there's something with that can take some of the pressure off of preservation that gets in the way of some densification. But just also to say that there are low-hanging fruit in terms of providing for some densification, especially if say that follows the Forward 2050 and NRPC's goals for dealing with transportation.
And but to get back, I think, to your core question, which is about the collaboration, the counties, you guys are working together, you're setting the stage for that, but the success of any strategy depends on as few of outliers as possible. So a lot of that has to do with you talking to your colleagues, on the various city governments. I know we're going to be prioritizing that we've been meeting with lots of mayors. Of course, they have their councils to collaborate with. And so at the end of the day, the more people that participate together and plan together, the more successful it is. The thing is, y'all here in this region have a long history of collaboration. I mean, X&A, I-49, you've done some big things because you all pulled together on it. And so, we're very hopeful that you'll see the need for doing that with regional planning.
And one last little thing is that we also recognize that a lot of this comes down to folks in the broader public having greater connection and understanding with, well, why are we having these issues? And is the decision that's being made at city council something that will help us solve them? And I think there's a big disconnect in that, they're not going to sit through this sort of a presentation, but, we're sort of thinking about that from how you approach messaging to a broader audience, because it's really important that folks understand where the difficulties are coming from and how that can be addressed by good decision-making.
Thank you.
Justice Jones?
Thank you both for being here. I have a couple of questions. The first one is, a lot of the sales tax, property tax data that y'all have is geared towards the way cities work and operate, at least my assumption, y'all's data. In the county, our sales taxes, our property tax is a much more significant portion, and sales tax less, generally because any sales tax generators get annexed by cities, and they just come out and grab them. That's the way it works. I'm not mad about it. Just that's there. So when we're talking about infrastructure paying for itself, your graphs are all, focused around the destination locations, expanding those, but within the regions that are all in the cities. But we also have a need to grow our tax base and be able to pay for our infrastructure that's out in the county and shared services that are shared among all the citizens of the county, regardless of whether they live in the county or the cities. How does something like this take that into effect? Because if we put destination centers out in the county, they're going to get annexed unless they're out in the middle of just nowhere, right? And eventually they will get annexed. So how do we encourage that growth but actually maintain a tax base, a revenue base to pay for the infrastructure associated with those things?
Well, right now, I think the main piece is that you brought that up so that we can make sure that we address that in our work. So we haven't studied that specifically, but we're basically here to get your input and to get input from other groups so that we know where we need to change, adapt in terms of strategies. So
I love the data. Don't get me wrong. I'm very county focused, even though I live in a city. I live in one of the big four, but I think about how the county is going to continue in the future and how we maintain ourselves. The second big question is around coordination, cooperation. You mentioned outliers and planning together. I agree, we absolutely need to do that. In Benton County, we are somewhat of an outlier in a couple different ways. One of the ways is we've shied away from any type of the Z word, zoning, right? The more government side, the more strict planning. We have a compatibility that we go for. I'm sure y'all have looked at that. And it's worked really well because we're unincorporated. We have a very historical agricultural base, very rural, maintain the space, the beauty, those type of things in the county. So you mentioned the ETJ as well. How do we, or do you have any thoughts on how we try to blend that together, still maintaining our character, but also coordinating and examples of coordination or thoughts about coordination with the cities? This may be applicable, I'm sure it will be for Washington County too, but how do we build that process?
Susan wrote a laundry list. So.
Yeah, I have a big old list, but, and they're different, as you pointed out, for each county because you operate your development in different ways. And so, like even Washington County with their 1 acre zoning and everything done by conditional use permits, I would go so far as to say that's barely zoning. So for y'all to be able to map something that is clear and predictable and doesn't leave you stranded with a huge infrastructure bill at the end of the day and no sales tax to help with it. There are all sorts of tools that can be suggested on that matrix of small government, small regulation to large government, large regulation. And I suspect both counties will wind up somewhere on that middle line. There are things that you can do to reduce infrastructure maintenance costs without increasing regulation too much. And most of that has to do with connectivity requirements, like Matt said about the congestion. It has to do with, all of these, and even rural subdivisions around septic, and then they all hit the county road at one spot and it becomes a logjam. And so I love the fact that you brought up the sales tax in the county and getting annexed, because that wasn't on our radar. But, we'll introduce thoughts about that as well. I mean, there is a question, depending on your commitment to rural preservation, the best way to do that is through the dirty Z word. I mean, it gives you more predictability than any other tool. But y'all have to, decide how you feel about that.
The other way I see that is in y'all's 3 slides where you said where we're going with a little work with a real commitment. Because that real commitment maintains that density inside the cities primarily without having them expand aggressively, right? So that allows the county, that allows the rural to maintain the natural beauty and those type of things, allows for that work to be out there. So what tools do we have to help the cities or to work with the cities to get them to really go down, really be a part of that? Because they're going to be the primary drivers with the revenue and the cost associated with that plan. That plan falls primarily on the cities. State aid, federal aid, things like that, but very, very little from the county side other than what can we do to help with this?
And I think that's crucial. But also, one thing in one of those quadrants was agreements between city and county. How do you handle subdivision? And how do you move more into alignment with, because frankly, y'all don't want to be holding the bag because cities refuse to annex when you'd really like to get something off your plate, because it wasn't done to their standards. So, at the end of the day, do you want to find some sort of alignment where you're annexation ready for things that are residential that aren't really being helpful to you, either for rural character or for tax base?
I think you were saying, if we didn't want to grow much as the county, then how do we help ensure on the city side? I think again, that's still related to zoning more than anything else. It's what rules are you going to put in place to slow down development in the county areas, and then working through agreements with the cities in terms of what regulations they have, collaborate on that. We've thought a little bit about how their standards can adjust, but I think it's sort of a new world for everybody. So that's kind of, I think it's an open question for us too, but one that we'll certainly think about and make some recommendations on.
Thank you.
Justice Coger?
Can you hear? So I asked my constituents to send me questions to ask, so my question is going to be a little more specific than what we've had. For instance, when we talk about growth and development, that's going to generate more solid waste. Based on your knowledge and experience, and maybe examples from other areas that have already gone through this kind of growth, how did they tackle that with the more recycling, or how did they address that, and how do you see it being addressed with your plan?
Have you looked into it before?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, this is something that Rob brought up to us from the council, and we looked into a few things, but we haven't dealt with that in our own work on regional growth. It's normally been something that the management companies had taken care of and hadn't elevated itself as such an issue. I did look a bit into the recommendations, because there was a study with recommendations in terms of the recycling programs and composting and things like that. But in terms of the issues that your constituents are dealing with, we don't have much experience on that side of things.
You say that last?
Oh, I said we don't have experience on that side of things.
Okay, another question that someone had, when you were talking about growth, how do you mitigate environmental impacts such as water quality, air quality, and habitat loss? What have you seen in your experience, how that should be tackled?
Well, once again, it depends on how much y'all are willing to get into the regulatory game. Because there's a lot that can be done. Like Matt talked about stormwater management, and one of the best ways to do that is through care and even preservation of your streams and rivers and, the buffers. And you don't have any regulatory requirements to do that in Arkansas, or minimal regulatory requirements to do that. But those are some of the best habitat corridors available if, that's a high priority for your constituency. So there are tools so that single thing, if you can focus on care and nurturing of streams and rivers, that helps with water quality, it helps with wildlife. And so but once again, it requires regulatory commitment. And, y'all have to answer that one.
But there's also, there's a scale of things as we get to a strategy overall that we'll have to look at a number of plans and funding sources for those. So one of those is in terms of preservation. So which areas are most critical for preservation, and then is there a funding source for the land trust to be able to preserve those areas, for instance? In terms of the streams and waterways, there's also something we've been thinking about in terms of stormwater management, and how, since the cities do need to manage their stormwater, is there a fee that's added to development, to utilities, that then can pay for restoration and protection of those waterways and watersheds? And that's a piece of it. Also, the piece on, say, a canopy plan for planting. One thing critical there in terms of wildlife is for diversity of trees and ecosystems. So something that you would do with a plan like that is to ensure that you're not just sort of planting one species and making sure you're not planting invasives, but that you're planting in such a way that is right for the environment, the riparian environment, if it's along a stream, or the upland environment, where you're finding places that are targeted for canopy expansion. But that all needs planning, and that's done collectively, and funding source to be able to pay for it, whether that's philanthropic, or whether it's tied to some sort of utility or other fee.
Justice Ballinger?
Just as everyone else has said, thank you for coming out this evening. So a question about first thing, is that slide available for all of us after?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I didn't take pictures or anything like that, so I took notes, but I just want to make sure that was something I could look at further. The one slide I saw where it had the survey of the top issues that are most important, the top one being preserving nature, things of that nature. About that data, how was that gathered exactly? Is that new residents coming in? People, tell me about the sample of that.
It's not a statistically accurate survey, it's ad hoc.
Yeah, so this is,
willing to.
yeah, this is just an open survey, so
Got it.
it's not statistically significant. We're hoping to get as many people to take it as possible. Okay. So right now, we're probably at 1,000, and we hope to get more people.
Okay, was that through social media, I guess, probably?
Yes.
A bit through that, and yeah,
Okay.
and just around through these events, yeah.
Okay, appreciate that. And because obviously, what you were mentioning before, the number one issue was natural beauty. And then we're talking about in future slides about more higher density housing. Can you explain and kind of walk me through how that, because that seems contradictory to me. When you have high density housing, that seems like you're going away from natural beauty and also character and neighborliness. So can you please explain how those coincide?
Yeah, well, in a few ways. So the natural areas, the point with having a mix of housing density, so not everything high density. And I think, I do want to reinforce the fact that every single city needs housing of every single type, from large single-family homes to small ones, townhomes, and apartments. In aggregate, a higher density than you've been having. There are places that exist that can take housing, like the 71B corridor, for instance, which would be new housing that would not be taking up agricultural land today. Whatever extent that occurs, and that has a lot to do with financing and so forth, there's a demand for it. Whether or not it's going to be built comes down to financing and landowners and the development industry in general. But any new housing that you absorb into existing areas is not taking on new land. Then in addition, it's if you grow in new areas, let's say a typical subdivision that you're getting today is an average overall, like gross acres is on average like between, it's about 3 units per acre. If you can get to 6, then you're taking up half the land. But 6 units to the acre is not super dense. You don't have to go very high. You just have to go a little bit higher than you are. So that's that piece. The character and neighborliness. If you took, say, that 6 units to an acre, that's really nothing bigger than 3 stories and not for more than like a block, followed by some townhomes and a good mix of single-family homes. So it's really a scale and character that's a little bit more connected to the historic towns and what their form has been historically than it is anything else. So it's in keeping with that. And lastly, the piece on neighborliness. We bring that up, this community within a community that we heard from folks, including the Rotary, is in providing new development with open spaces that are connected so that people have a place to walk their dog together and meet in the park. And we're not getting that so much in new development, and that makes a big difference. We do a lot of development of that type. And every single time that we visit and we're taking pictures and they're like, who's this person taking pictures? There's people watching and they come out and they say, what are you doing taking pictures? And they all remark that, I moved here and I didn't know any of my neighbors before, and now I'm friends with my neighbors and we have dinner together and all this. It has a lot to do with the form and having a bit of a mix that gets people on the sidewalk, meeting their neighbors, and building that social interaction so that there is that connection. So, and I do want to reinforce, you don't need to go like super high density. It doesn't take a lot to make a big difference.
And a follow-up. The other chart showed as far as tax base and obviously the more downtown, higher density areas naturally have a higher tax base. But an issue that I hear from my constituents all the time is housing affordability, affordable rent and things of that nature, obviously all those skyrocketing. But obviously what the graph shows that with the higher tax density in those areas, how does that, with further density as far as construction, to me it's just a simple supply and demand issue. You said before that there was not enough rental units, and I guess overabundance of single-family homes. But yeah, we see single-family homes prices skyrocket. We see rents skyrocketing. So continuing or promoting further density in building, how does that translate to lower costs for rent and also home ownership?
Sure. Part of that is folks who would, part of it's materials and labor, and that's something that we don't have much of a control over. So that's an issue. There is a big supply and demand issue. Some of this is stuff that you can't easily solve, though maybe we can charge the council with figuring out how to solve some of these bigger issues that affect everyone, not just Northwest Arkansas. And that's development financing is structured in a particular way to provide a certain set of products, normally at a relatively high volume per type. That's just the way the financing system works. And that's not working to anyone's benefit. Now we can change the zoning to allow for something different, but that doesn't mean that's going to be built. So we know that is the sort of number one issue in terms of delivering change. And so if you can deliver more volume of that mix, then you're going to see the prices adjust and come down. And there are studies, I think they're mostly Canadian studies of places that have implemented change and had a lot of infill, and they've seen, I think Montreal was the big one that really proved out. They followed a number of families as they moved through different housing, as housing came online, and saw the prices slightly reduce. You know, they're not going to drop because that's going to be a problem too. But they saw the prices reduce as people moved from one housing situation to another one they were more suited, that was more suited to them. And that process takes time, so it's not overnight, but it is a supply and demand issue. But the market's manipulated in a number of different ways. One of them is that funding piece. The other is just the business of development. Those are related, those are manipulated in ways. It's also manipulated by zoning and by fees. We were talking with the infrastructure working group earlier today about how having different fees in one city versus another in terms of your sewer and water and police and parks and whatnot encourages people to develop in one place versus another, as opposed to where it might more naturally be suited or situated. So the filtering works, and that has been studied, but there are other constraints that exist that have to be dealt with one way or another to help the market function.
Justice Hires?
Hi, thank you so much. This is fascinating to me. I love the data. I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier because I think it's kind of a big elephant in the room, at least for the Washington County folks. I'm assuming Benton County as well, because you mentioned the barely zoning in Washington County. You know, we're residential agricultural. We know that some growth is inevitable. You know, if we do nothing, we're looking at sprawl hitting those rural areas, eating up more of that agricultural area. But our recent attempts to zone some areas as commercial kind of led to a great deal of pushback from folks in rural areas. And so I don't know if it was the messaging or I'm just wondering how we can go about zoning in a way that kind of strikes a balance between smart growth that can create communities and still honor neighborhoods without kind of striking fear in rural communities at the downfall of their way of life.
Yeah, that's crucial. And the conditional use permitting policy, that the reason I would think you as justices, as a quorum court, would be very uncomfortable with it is because it's unpredictable. And you don't know what's going to be requested. You don't know to what level you'll be able to negotiate. And even more importantly, your constituents don't know. And so they can't visualize what's coming. So, and the biggest burden that you have to this is your septic. You know, so how do you permit rural appropriate commercial uses on septic, for one thing? And Matt and I did a lot of work, Jennifer Hurley and I did a lot of work in rural Vermont, where everything is septic. And it's looking at, so do you do a step system? You know, do you cluster? Do you permit a density neutral cluster? So for a certain land area where you say it's 1 acre per lot, if you permit clustering, you can consolidate your drain fields, or you can do a step system, but maintain even more apparent open space because it's the same land area. But I think I would be inclined, we've done very rural zoning for large counties, and you have to be really, really cautious that you never get above the scale of what I would call a hamlet, basically a crossroads. You know, you can have some very small And I'm thinking this one county in particular, it was farm-based businesses. You know, where's the feed store and where's the cafe? And you can do that at a certain level of intensity, but it has to be right, because if you let a strip center in that looks like it belongs in your Washington County, it looks like it belongs in Fayetteville, then, you know, your residents are going to be very distraught. So, but zoning can predict, if you do a rural commercial district that is crafted carefully for your context, then your residents know what to expect when someone requests that zoning. You know, it's a whole, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying visioning is probably helpful too.
Yeah, that's true. Go ahead.
Well, you could have stepped in and done all that. I was just saying that there is a role for visioning and engaging with constituents to be able to depict, like, does this feel okay for us? Is this too intense? Is this too little? You know, to help people understand that there's a choice to be made. And like a lot of times in doing zoning, you'll go through that process and then determine, you know, what are the controls that we want to put in place and where should these things go. But when it's a big question and people have a hard time visualizing through words, it can be hard to accept if you don't have, you know, the sort of visioning process to go along with it.
Justice Rosenbaum.
They gave me the mic again. But this could be maybe a part of our closing. Let's call it big picture part 2 question. So I'm assuming you all will develop some kind of proposal from your work, from your contract with the NWA Council. And going forward, so that's my question, logistics and moving forward. It sounds to me like this proposal will have options, and we have lots to discuss and think about, different needs all over. Others have mentioned how complex this is and how interconnected it is, but it's not just regional, it's also state-based, because the state works with NWA Regional Planning, which works on funding for our roads. It's a lot of components. It's also the private sector as well, and their component. So who's going to quarterback it? Are we dependent on the generosity of the Walton Family Foundation to continue to fund your work moving forward? Is there a part 2, part 3? What does it look like potentially for us moving forward?
I think that's been the biggest question out of the council folks, who we keep coming up with things like, well, you need to do this, you need to do that, and they're saying, well, who needs to do that? It's not us. That is basically with the strategy that we'll deliver to them. We'll have responsible parties that are recommended. Now, a lot of it really is under the purview of RPC, the Regional Planning Commission, and you know, they, just like everything else, is underfunded. They don't have right now the funding to do the things that they could do, that they have the ability to do, because they can't, you know, provide the staff to do so. So a lot of this will be like, well, how do we establish more funding and consistent funding for them to take on a larger coordinating role for all of these municipalities and agencies and entities that are needed to work together to move forward. And that includes like a series of additional plans that may not exist today, but need to get funded and created and buy-in so that people can be coordinated in how they're acting on a local level.
Justice Dean?
Thank you, sir. Thank you guys for coming in, and really the only question I wanted to know is how long it's taken you to come up with these numbers.
I think we started gathering data in March.
In March?
In March, and my staff that's back in the room has been tortured for months, revising posters and graphics and things like that. You know, but we've been looking at the zoning codes, and Craft and Toll's working with us, and they've been also looking at infrastructure issues around like existing infrastructure needs and so forth, roadways and whatnot. So yeah, that's been a lot of the background analysis, including those graphs and tax stuff. Is Urban 3 getting tax data from counties, tax assessors and so forth and doing analysis on that.
Okay, thank you.
Justice Smith?
There we go. Thank you for being here. I should be a familiar face. I attended my first placemaking seminar in 2012, so I followed the movement, not to the level you are as a subject matter expert. And what I've noticed, it's a great laboratory. There's a lot of great ideas, but there's also a lot of really stupid ones that Arkansans would not like. And so that's why I try to really lean into the conversation and say, hey, where do we learn from? And one of the things that I've also noticed is that it doesn't take human behavior into account. It takes ideals and what we've seen in other cities around the area. And sometimes I feel like Arkansans are left out. I've watched some of the cities do the public input process better than others. I think Bentonville is going through a lot of public input now, and I think they do a great job. And I think it's created a richer plan that will be a better fit for them long term. But I know as a young professional when I moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area in 1986, it's a lot the same kind of things we were dealing with in the Metroplex, right? And we moved out gladly for a 35-mile commute to be able to stretch out a little bit, not have to live in an apartment, and get a little more square footage for our money. And I can't imagine that we wouldn't see the same thing here versus, hey, let's just move into a smaller space in a like a tower. And what I've noticed also is that as we get new highways, like from downtown Bentonville, you can now, or the Walmart home office specifically, you can now get to Sulphur Springs in 15 minutes less, which is a 35-minute commute. That's ideal for somebody who's moving from Atlanta or Dallas or another metropolitan area. My concern about focusing on how dense can we make the 4 cities is that we're still robbing development from the very small cities who do need area-specific economic development solutions, you know, to build their tax base so that they can extend their sewer infrastructure, et cetera. And one of the challenges that we face with the way our county 1-cent sales tax is set up is that it is slowly defunding us with each census because it is divided up by density to the municipalities. And so, I mean, this is a great conversation for us in the county, but this is really a conversation for the cities. And, you know, if you compare Benton and Washington County, across the board on our taxes, Washington County taxes are 25% more than Benton County. And so we really are looking at, you know, how do we even do the things that we need to do currently? So, and I get really concerned every time Northwest Arkansas Council brings us a new great idea that's going to make our area better because it increases our cost of living. I've watched that happen for the last 25 years. And so I worry about the people that, you know, put every bit of skin in the game to make this area great. And I just want to know in all of this that we're taking care of them and not, because what they're going to do is they're just going to pick up and move to another city. And we really want them to have roots here. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't have roots. And I think it's really important to the sustainability and quality of life in a community to have people who are able to raise generations of their family. Thank you.
I did want to mention that when we spoke earlier, and maybe it was must have been last week, to the mayors of Gravette, Gentry, Siloam Springs. I think Centerton was in that. Cave Springs was there, yeah. But, you know, the smaller cities were saying exactly that we feel that we're often left out of the funding because the funding goes to the places that have more population. We also talked to some community members, even here in Springdale that said, we need a focus on smaller entrepreneurship, smaller scale economic development, and we took that away to look at the needs that even Prairie Grove's charming Main Street could be enlivened with more local small entrepreneurs. St. Lincoln, we think, has such beautiful potential, but it needs that sort of focus. So I think you're totally right in terms of the smaller cities losing out. The council this time, I don't know in the past, but coming into this, they said very clearly that we don't want to just focus on the big cities. We need to look at the small cities too, and also the mid-sized cities in between, because the small places feel like they're being looked past. We think they've got a lot of great potential. We work with small towns in other places. There's a lot you can do, and I think the strategies haven't been working in their favor yet. So that's certainly something that we think is important. And I did also want to address, in terms of building a mix of housing, and there are some people who want to be in the downtown. It's not most of them. I think most of the people who we've heard from say that they want to be close enough, but like not right in the middle of the action, but they don't want it too far away. Providing for a variety of housing in different situations will allow for more people who want to choose to live further out on some acreage, but have that 30-minute commute do so by allowing some other folks who want to be closer in to have housing for them too. It's just that because there's not enough variety of housing that's available, then that's causing people to sort of take the house that somebody else might want to have. And now that's not available on the market, and that sort of messes up with the dynamics. But I think you're right, and in all of this, it's about responding to and providing for choice, and it's limited right now, and it could be more. But again, the small cities, we certainly have been focused on them, and even Elkins, talking with the mayor early on about what the constituents are looking for. There was quite important and impactful. So they're certainly a part of the conversation.
Justice Rios Stafford.
Thank you. I'm back again with another question. This one is about the areas formerly known as extraterritorial jurisdictions. For the public, those are areas that ring the cities, and cities used to have some planning jurisdiction there, like with future land use maps or subdivisions and things like that. Those were abolished this year by the Arkansas legislature, and so those went away last month. In Washington County, we passed some minimal updates to our zoning code, basically just to remove all the references to those in our planning code. And so what has happened now with us is that those areas have defaulted to our default county zoning, which is low-density residential, no more than one home per acre, or agricultural. Even though some of these areas have been previously developed to city standards or quasi-city standards or things like that. So they're a patchwork, really, now. What are some recommendations or options that we have for those areas? Because I assume that my thought is that the reason those used to exist in the first place had to do with annexation, that there are areas that cities might want to annex at some point in the future, and so the city should have some say in their development. Now that that's been done away with, what do we do there?
That's a really great question, and something that, I would suggest you spend some serious effort to work on together. One of and on that matrix Matt showed, one of the items that I was noodling about this last week is, how do you, first of all, if it's adjacent to a city, is there going to be an annexation in its future? Do you want it? And if it is something that you do want to reduce your obligations to, then it needs to be annexation ready. Because we've also heard from some cities that with the loss of the ETJ, if the subdivision standards aren't similar or, equivalent,
And engineering manuals.
and engineering manuals and permitting processes, that they may not be interested, and then you would be stuck. So I think to the question earlier about alignment with cities, it may take some collaboration between the county and the cities in your jurisdiction to see how you can get to some sort of a level, an MOU for how this process is going to move from them to you. And I know it's easier just to think, okay, we'll just figure it out as it comes along. But if you do it on an application by application basis, then you have no predictability. And then secondly, about the zoning, translation to ag, if the use is already something else, that you need to figure out a district that's going to work for that, and it's back to your question about what's appropriate in the county. And since Washington County already has zoning, you are in a position where you could add a new district for that edge, that fringe piece. And that was one of the recommendations I made is figure out how you want to handle the zoning at the edge, because it's going to be a very real problem or issue.
Justice Moore?
Thank you. Hi, thanks for coming. There's an area that I was hoping would be addressed tonight, but nobody's brought it up except for a gentleman that did a public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and that's solid waste. Our Mount Trashmore in Tawnytown is quickly running out of capacity, and there seems to be very little, if any, desire to locate another one within our area or even suitable area because of our karst geology. So and of course with the population going up, the amount of trash generated is going to go up as well. Has there been any thought or processes come up with for that?
Yeah, and that did come up earlier in a comment. We don't have, us ourselves don't have experience in dealing with that. It has come up because obviously it's a mounting issue. I know there's a recent study. No pun intended. Yeah, no pun intended. I know there's a recent study on the matter. When we did discuss that with the folks we're working with at the council, and said in order to address it, we're not the people to address that, but we can include the sort of fact that this is a pressing issue that needs to be addressed in terms of some of the plans that get set forth in the strategy for moving forward. As far as what the best way to do that is, that's not our expertise, but certainly clarifying and elevating the fact that it needs to be addressed is something that we can do.
Justice Rivera Lopez?
Thank you all again for being here. Another question, like many others. I want to see if this is a decent, distillation of what's being said from some of the charts that we saw earlier. So when we're discussing housing choices, what I seem to see from the numbers is that there is a lack of supply of higher density homes, which leads people to have the only housing option being something like single family residential. And this obviously is creating an artificial market where the only type of housing you can compete for is single family residential. And if we're talking about something like affordability, if we don't have other housing options and we're all competing for the same housing, that is artificially driving up those prices, right? Please, is that a fair distillation of what's being said?
Yeah.
And then I would like to speak to another point on this. Can we acknowledge that for a lot of times, housing is transitory? It is for different parts of your life that you tend to live in certain housing. And so as we've discussed, if unlike a lot of you, and this is unfair to say, I do consider myself a young urban professional. You all are probably professionals, and I respect that. But again, rental housing is typically transitory. It is for a certain subset of people who are typically looking at something that is not the investment or the wealth builder that homeownership is. It is housing. And what we do when we build that housing is that we allow people to move into the area for the time that they will be, urban professionals working there, and move out. So I don't view this to be a huge threat on people who are looking to build roots here, who are looking to, establish families or anything else. Can you speak to that? That's not exactly, I don't believe that's what the data shows, and I'd like just to hear your opinions on that.
Well, I might have to ask for clarity on what in terms of what exactly tied to what the data shows or doesn't, for clarity.
The data is showing what the sort of housing that people want, specifically in those big four cities.
Yeah, well, and we have it for mid-sized cities and smaller towns, and there's a larger regional document that talks a little bit about unincorporated as well. There's lumped together is multifamily and rentals, which includes single-family rentals and townhome rentals. That's the whole rental market is the biggest gap. Folks that are looking for housing. Some people, their only choice because of their level of income is to rent. They don't have an opportunity to purchase, and but they don't have housing they can afford either. And we have spoken with some folks in that community, various communities that are dealing with those issues. But there's also people that are looking for a single-family rental and it's not available, or a townhouse rental and it's not available. We looked more specifically a few years ago at this in Bentonville when looking at their code, and had a little more data in terms of like how much of this is rentals in the multifamily and single-family and townhome. But to your point, it's that part of the market en masse is what's not met, but it's not met anywhere, and it sort of needs to be met, or it should be, or the community would benefit from it being met everywhere or in more places, which is why I bring up, I think it gets mischaracterized by saying, well, we just have to have high density and multifamily everywhere. That is not what I'm saying. We need to have every type of housing available in every community because there is a need for that wide variety of housing. And that is, in many instances, being near work. Well, you don't just need apartments near jobs, because there's jobs of all sorts of types, and income levels, family compositions, and so forth. And what we end up having instead is just sort of one type of housing in a large area as opposed to a mix. And that mix, both in terms of type and tenure, and you can't really control tenure, zoning can't control ownership or rental, but that is just not being provided sufficiently, and that is disrupting the market in the way described in the data. Does that answer your question?
Is there another question from a Benton County JP? Because I don't have, all right, Justice McCracken.
Well, my question is more about numbers. You're looking at, right now, we got 550,000 people in the country, in the two counties. You're looking at 1 million, which is roughly an 80% growth in the next 25 years. Your slides in 1985 showed we had 28 square miles of density. 2024, we had 175, which is about a 500% growth. You're only looking at about a 25% growth to 30% growth in the size in the next 25 years. That's going to put a severe change to the neighborhoods and their identities. You can see a lot of that in downtown Bentonville, where there used to be small homes with yards and gardens, and now there's homes that cover pretty much everything, an entire lot. And Bella Vista, Vast majority of Bella Vista is septic, and they're building houses now that if you was to step out the back door, it's a 30-foot drop. So that's not going to change there. You're not going to get density there. So you're going to put a lot of density into a lot of places that it's just going to go very crowded. And that's going to definitely change the atmosphere and the identities of the cities. And that's just my thoughts.
Thank you.
I have Justice Secchi.
Thank you. I've been waiting for a long time. But I want to say that we at Washington County do have a zoning ordinance, and I believe that we are moving in the right direction. We have corridors that we're trying to get businesses and industrial and commercial businesses to build alongside rather than going deep into the county, into the residential areas, which a lot of our residents don't want because it does mar the beauty of the landscape. And they're concerned with that density moving out in their areas. We're working with our director and our planning board and Judge Deakins and coming up with a plan that almost everybody is pleased with. And this has been probably about 3 years for some in the process. Others, it's been 6 years in the process trying to work this out. We hear from the realtors that people move in from other states because they're looking for the green acre experience. They want to live out in the county. They want to shop. They want the peace and the tranquility and the beauty that Arkansas affords them. I am pleased with the direction that we at Washington County are going, trying to preserve that beauty, that agriculture, because Washington County is the #1 agriculture exporter in the state, and we need to protect that. My question is, how do we work with cities to keep them from annexing? Because that's what I hear. I don't want to be annexed, but it seems to be an encroachment that happens a mile at a time, another mile at a time, and yet the county does not benefit any taxes from this, but they put in this infrastructure, sewerage and roads or whatever, and receive all the tax benefits. How do we work with that? And I know that this is part of what this presentation is. But I also want to say that we at Washington County are moving in the right direction, and that your presentation makes me feel good in the direction that we're going. Thank you.
Sounds like your annexation.
Yeah. We're going to make a recommendation that both counties and cities look at strategies for annexation because, my understanding is annexation is at will in Arkansas. So it's ultimately up to your landowner whether or not they choose to be annexed. And I would suggest that part of the goals of the county should be how are you collaborating with those landowners that you see as being vulnerable or leaning toward annexation? Are there ways that you can work with them? Usually it has to do with services. They're looking for city services. Most landowners, it's a real struggle for them to make that decision because it's also higher taxation. And so that is one of the things we'll be providing to the council is suggestions on strategies for annexation. And it goes both ways. It's, what should cities consider and what are strategies that counties can use not to lose land area. Yeah.
Do I have any remaining questions from a Benton County JP? I've got Justice Smith.
So this is all a great idea to do some planning. Our massive need is to do some infrastructure planning. If we go to it feels like we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit here. I know you need to plan, you need to have a plan before you plan for infrastructure. But the challenge for us has been funding for infrastructure. And I've watched, I feel like sometimes the prosperity of Bentonville and Rogers robs the small counties or the small towns of grant money, because we tip the scales kind of off. And so they're left with nothing, and unless their water supply is slowly poisoned, and then they qualify for a grant, and it takes a long time to get through that process. And also what I've seen is like the numbers for a grant to put in a new water line to an area so that it can develop is like more than what's even possible. So it feels like, well, the conversation we should really be having is how do we fix that? Because this is all great, but we already have the areas available for density who are interested in moving that direction. And what we really need right now is help with infrastructure and deciding where that land is someday for light rail, if that's going to be, so we can have those conversations. It just feels like infrastructure is so much more important than what we're talking about here. Does your process lead to that?
Yeah, that's, I know the infrastructure issues just rapidly accelerated, and we all wish that this was happening 2 years ago instead of now. And so certainly number one in everything that we've looked at has been focused first on infrastructure. So the infrastructure study underway right now is the first step in that. So that just got funded and started not too long ago. I think it was recently announced. That's the first step in setting forward. We have some recommendations in terms of what to do with that in terms of a shared infrastructure plan for 25 years that's tied to funding, but not only for the core cities, like we said, also for the small cities in that. And the ways in which, rather than competing against all these grants and everybody having to spend all their time on grants and competing city with city, that the infrastructure strategy be across borders and take care of that collectively, as opposed to everyone fighting over a small pool of money, but tied to having the funding mechanism. So there's a few other pieces that we have that we're starting to look at from an infrastructure standpoint. But I think that's number one, probably the first thing that came to the table for us was infrastructure. We tend to present it after housing and transportation, because those are the pain points for most of the public. They're not as aware of infrastructure issues. So we kind of put it after and say, well, your housing is an issue and your transportation is an issue. And by the way, you can't solve these because the infrastructure. So that's why it's in that order, but it's definitely a part.
Final call here for Washington County JP's Justice Bruns.
One statement I heard you say a while ago that and correct me if I'm wrong, that 54% was kind of the ratio that it was costing people to be able to drive back and forth home.
It was 24% of their income, 24.
24% of their income, and then the gas prices and all that stuff added on?
Yeah, it's like purchasing or leasing a vehicle, maintenance costs, gas prices, insurance, registration, and then usually a few vehicles per household.
Well, that's getting real close to what a lender would top off for giving a loan on a single-family dwelling. And so what I would see is that on these single-family dwellings, instead of having those, people are going to start trying to get into multi-housing. And if these developers are looking for multi-housing, right now I've got 3 that are looking outside, just outside city limits, because the land's cheaper. And they are going to be treading on some very dangerous areas, because these people don't want apartment buildings beside their house. And my question is, if we did get that, and I had to follow up what Mr. Jones said earlier, which I thought was a great point, if we do allow that to be built, it will be annexed right away for the sales tax and revenue and everything for the population more than anything else. And the county, I believe, is funded mainly, our county is funded mainly by property tax. So the more there's annexations, that's less money we're gonna have for property taxes. Okay, so we're gonna have to find some ways to generate money to be able to, does your study cover either one of those? That's two questions. And then the last one is, if we do have people move out into the county, you know, we can only have 3 divisions on one parcel before you have to get a large-scale development, but you put 4 parcels on all this property out here that we've got that's unincorporated, and you got a lot of septic tanks out here. And you got in my opinion, you got a potential big problem, because we got a lot of watersheds here. So has that been addressed?
So, you know, you're talking about something that is a very real problem, but Arkansas is a property rights state. So it's very difficult to tell a landowner that they can't sell their property to make money on it. But your point about the multifamily housing, right now you don't have zoning that permits that in Washington County. It would be a conditional use permit that you would use to permit it. You don't have an obligation to do it. So the question will be for you all as the Quorum Court is, are you going to establish some guidelines for what you're willing to permit in the county? And the lowest obligation, so you have 4 options like Matt said. The one that changes the least, that keeps the county the most rural and keeps you out of the business of big government, is just to say, hey, you know, we want to stay rural. Right now we have a 1-acre zoning and we don't intend to change it. If you all as a Quorum Court agreed to that, then you wouldn't be, you know, people would know not to come asking. But that's one of those strategic decisions that you're going to have to determine which way you want to go. Because if you do ramp up development, you're going to also have to ramp up services and staffing, and, you know, you're going to need sales tax to support that.
I think I've got two more from Benton County. I've got Justice Rissler, and then I'll go to you, Justice Jones.
Thank you for coming and your presentation. We probably leave this with as many questions as we do answers, and planning is that way. One of the things I wrestle with is in zoning or in planning, when you use the Salt Lake example, and if I'm not mistaken, that's surrounded by a lot of federal land as well, a little bit boxed in as already. And here, all the land that we're discussing isn't really ours. It's, I say all, but like 90-some%, probably 98% is privately held. And these people bought it with a bundle of rights that they expected, things they could and could not do. And as these things change, there's actually an economic impact to them, up or down, generally winners and losers in that landscape. And are there any examples out there where, I don't know how you compensate them, but how to level that playing field a bit? Examples of communities that have compensated some of those that, when rights were taken from them?
Yes, and it's very difficult, but we worked on the big island of Hawaii on the southern shore where they have volcanoes and they have typhoons and they have volcanic ash and, what they call VOG, which it ruins your lungs. And I mean, they have like every natural problem you could possibly hope to have. And there was a big subdivision that was done in the 50s and 60s on the side of the volcano. And the county determined, just for life safety and liability, that they needed to buy out those landowners. So they set aside a part of their capital fund, and one tier at a time, depending on how exposed you were, they are in the process of buying that out. But it's extremely expensive, and that's because it's a life safety issue. It's another thing altogether to do it for property rights. And in a state like Arkansas, unless someone is willing to buy the land, it's very unlikely that you're going to convince a landowner to give up their property rights. So it's more of a challenge here.
You can TDR, but then you have to limit density.
Justice Coger?
They don't have any to.
Yes, I don't have a question, but I'm told we have 4 people who could not get into the meeting earlier before public comment. I wonder if we can make accommodation for those 4 people to speak before we adjourn. Thank you.
Are there any other JPs that want to speak? Justice Massengill?
Just hold it down while I talk. Okay. Thank you for the presentation and all the information you provided. In the maps you showed of the kind of the current trajectory we were on and the desired state, the desired state showed a lot of really high density directly adjacent to either low density or green space. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe you can explain that. But my question is, how do you protect that green space or that area from being developed? Because if you got high density, high value, it's going to want to be developed. So how do you prevent that?
Did you mean on this one? Or was it
Yeah, this is it. So what mechanism would you use to keep these areas adjacent to the high density from being developed?
Well, I will note that the high density is not estimated. It just looks red, it's drawn as red to indicate. In terms of the amount of anticipated growth in that area, we were being pretty conservative. You could probably double what we estimated. So we don't think that it's likely that you would have a significant amount of density in those areas relative to, we're not talking like 10 stories or anything, So still relatively low, still not every parcel being redeveloped. Now, the green space side of things is a financial and planning issue from the side of municipalities for one, which is, what are their park acquisition plans? And we are looking at things like the need for land bank that can acquire properties to be reused for other things. They could be reused for housing, but they could also be reused for parks. And that doesn't, each city has its own parks master plan, right? But have they been updated to consider a population of this scale? Probably not yet, because they're strapped for funding trying to fund the parks that they can get. And that funding's been going quite well, but we just see the expansion plans for any city, and so far what we've seen is not yet that acquisition plan for additional park space. So some of it comes out of new development, and that can be a standard within the zoning codes or the land development codes, which we've built into the recent ones that we've done here. So that's one side, but the other side is also what we discussed in terms of the preservation. Is there something that the land trust and funding mechanisms can be used to preserve lands at the edge as well? So those strategies are certainly things that we're thinking about, and appreciate the question and recommendation that we ensure that that's part of this.
So I'm going to go to Justice Jones, but I did want to address the previous request. We've been here 2.5 hours, and we're not going to reopen public comments. We had public comments earlier, and it was open, and folks had the opportunity to come forward, and everybody else was here, made it on time. Both of these bodies have regular public meetings 2 or 3 times a month, and obviously anybody's welcome to come speak at public comments there. Public comments are closed for this meeting. Justice Jones.
So what's the next steps? You said you're going to take some of our input back. Justice Rosenbaum had alluded to several options, and y'all confirmed that. So what's the time frame on that? When do you get to come back? When do we get to do this again? And y'all come back and present to us as a group, and then maybe we also have discussion as a group.
Well, that's great. This is the first time that you all came together. I mean, I think we would certainly be happy to come back and share our progress. Our goal for completing our recommendations is for the NWA Council's spring meeting, which is in April. So we'll be taking the input that we've gotten from these discussions, from all of our meetings, also written input on the website and our surveys and so forth. Take that back, and we'll be working over the winter to develop the plans. So I think
The strategy.
yeah, the strategy, not plans. We're very clear they're not plans, but they're strategies. But we'd certainly welcome the opportunity to come back before you all. It's not that hasn't been planned yet, because this was just put together, especially because in the spirit of collaboration, it was clear that this was important and necessary. So we haven't planned for when that comes again, but I think that's clearly on the table.
Thank you. Alluding to that, while our counties look at planning, zoning differently, our counties also face the same problems, and we have to address them in the same way. So it'd be very, very beneficial, in my opinion, that we discuss these problems together as part of the collaboration that they've discussed and we've discussed all night long.
Appreciate that, Justice Jones. I want to say thank you, Matt, Susan. Thank you so much for coming here tonight. I want to thank the Walton Family Foundation for funding this effort tonight, Northwest Arkansas Council for coordinating it. I know Rob's back there, Nelson's back there. Thank you, Mayor Sprouse. Sounds like we're meeting here again before too long, so I hope you guys, that sounds awesome. And I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Those are my closing remarks. Judge Deakins, you've got anything?
I appreciate the hospitality, Mayor Sprouse. What a wonderful discussion this evening. The challenges have been laid out. Can we answer the call?
We're adjourned.